How the Little Green Men phenomenon began on a Kentucky farm. This is the house near Kelly, where little men from outer space were supposed to have been seen last night. With the gun is Lucky Sutton, looking up at the porch roof where one of the invaders supposedly sat. In the doorway is Billy Ray Taylor, who says his hair was pulled by the man on the roof. And this begins the curious case of the 1955 Kelly-Hopkins encounter. Now, what we're going to share with you is the original story published August 22nd, 1955, by the Kentucky New Era about the little green men that allegedly landed in the Kelly community on August 21st, 1955. All kinds of investigations were going on today in connection with the bizarre story of how a spaceship carrying 12 to 15 little men landed in Kelly community early last night and battled occupants of a farmhouse. Most officials of the probes were reportedly being staged by the Air Force. More than a dozen state, county, and city officers from Christian and Hopkins counties went to the scene between 11 p.m. and midnight and remained until 2 a.m. without seeing anything either to prove or disprove the story about the ship and its occupants. The farmhouse is located on Old Madisonville Road, about 8 miles north of Hopkinsville. The property is occupied by Cecil Lucky Sutton, one of those who reported experiencing last night's phenomenon. There were some 10 to 12 persons at the house, including several children, but investigating officers were not able to determine exactly how many of those present actually claimed to have seen any of the little men from the spaceship. The only other person whom officers quoted directly was identified as Billy Ray Taylor, who you can see here in this picture. One account said Taylor is a visitor from Pennsylvania, which recently had a similar report of a spaceship. Neither Sutton nor Taylor was home when officers returned to the scene this morning. Now, the story broke around 11 o'clock last night when two cars, one bearing a Pennsylvania license, drove up to Hopkinsville Police Headquarters. Officers then at the station said the two autos contained at least 5 adults and several children. All appeared highly excited. Spokesman for the crowd told of how something resembling a spaceship or flying saucer had landed at the back of their house near Kelly, and 12 or 15 men, who appeared to be about 4 feet tall, had got out of the ship and come up to the house and done battle with the occupants. "We need help," one of the men said. "We've been fighting them for nearly 4 hours. 4 city police, Chief Russell Greenwell, T.C. Gross, Doris Francis, and Gary Salter, drove to the scene to see about the little men. By radio, contact was made with state troopers R.N. Ferguson Jr. and G.W. Riley and Deputy Sheriff George Batts, all of whom joined the motorcade to Kelly in their own vehicles. 4 MPs also went. The radio discussions also brought 2 Hopkins County deputy sheriffs and at least 3 state troopers from the station at Madisonville. First arrivers found the scene deserted. The 2 cars which had brought the report to Hopkinsville did not return to the Kelly farm until after officers had arrived and looked the situation over. Officers reported they found no tracks of little men, nor were there any indications anything had landed at the described spot behind the house. There was a hole in the screen at the window through which occupants said a shot had been fired at one of the strange little men. Both Chief Greenwald and Deputy Sheriff Batts said they got approximately the story from the still terrified and excited Sutton and Taylor families. Now, about 7 p.m., one of the men went out of the house to get a bucket of water. He saw what looked like a flying saucer come over the trees and land in a field at a point about a city block behind the house. There was no explosion, only a semi-hissing sound. And the watcher returned to the house with the bucket of water. A short time later, somebody reported some little men with big heads and long arms approaching the house. The men were described as having huge eyes and hands out of proportion to their small bodies. The visitors were wearing what looked to be metal plate. The men got their guns, a shotgun for Sutton and a .22 caliber target pistol for Taylor. By and by, one of the little men pressed his face against the window, and the shotgun was fired through the window. The face disappeared. The men decided to go outside and see if the visitor had been hit. Taylor was in front, and when he emerged from the front door, a huge hand reached down from the low roof above the door and grabbed him by the hair. He pulled away, and the two men went out of the house. One of the strange little men was in a nearby tree, another on top of the house. A blast from Sutton's shotgun knocked another one of the men down, but he did not appear to be hurt. He disappeared into the darkness. Taylor reportedly opened fire on the other members of the invading party, also with little effect. The battle went on for some time, and when the occupants of the house saw their chance, they jumped into their cars and drove to Hopkinsville for help. Deputy Sheriff Batts said the men told him that in all they fired up about 4 boxes of .22 caliber pistol shells. The officer quoted a neighbor saying he heard shooting over the Suttons by distinguishing only about 4 shots, and he mistook them for firecrackers. Most of the officers remained at the site for more than 2 hours, and during that period, there were approximately 25 persons at the scene. Only excitement during the period the officers were there came when an MP happened to step on a cat's tail while walking in the darkness near the house. The cat let out a squall, and for a few seconds there was much activity and scurrying around on the part of those present. 2 officers who returned to the Kelly area early this morning reported hearing that the little men had reappeared around the Sutton home at 3:30 a.m. Other investigators who went to Kelly later during the morning said that they were told Sutton and Taylor had gone to Evansville. Officers who visited the scene during last night's excitement were reluctant to express any opinion today in regard to the reported invasion of Kelly. All officials appeared to agree that there was no drinking involved. Only outspoken comment came from Frank Dudas, City Police Desk Sergeant, who was not on duty last night and had not visited the scene so far. He said, "I think the whole story is entirely possible." Sergeant Dudas was one of 2 city policemen who reported seeing 3 flying saucers early one morning last summer, he said. "I know I saw them. If I saw them, the Kelly story certainly could be true." Now, this sounds really fantastical. The problem is that, well, small metallic humanoids impervious to bullets sounds like nonsense. But the pictures are very entertaining. How the ears were swept back and the little bulging eyes on the side of the head. These babies look quite impressive, even though they're small stature. And this picture showing them about 2 3/4 feet high, barely 3 feet. And in the article, we heard that they were 4 feet. But there are explanations. And a popular image of the Hopkinsville goblin and a great horned owl as a hypothesized explanation. Remember, these creatures were never on the ground. One was in a tree and one was on the roof. And they both looked just like a great horned owl. In fact, psychologists Rodney Schmaltz and Scott Lilienfeld cite the alleged incident as an example of pseudoscience and an extraordinary claim to help students develop critical thinking skills. Although contemporary newspaper stories allege that all officials appeared to agree that there was no drinking involved, Schmaltz and Lilienfeld suggest that intoxication may have played a part in the sighting, and I agree. The Committee for Skeptical Inquiry member and skeptic Joe Nickel notes that the family could have misidentified eagle owls or even great horned owls, which are nocturnal, fly silently, have yellow eyes, and aggressively defend their nests. According to Nickel, meteor sightings also occurred at the time that could explain Billy Ray Taylor's claim that he saw a bright light streak across the sky and disappear beyond a tree line some distance from the house. Now, the reason we're bringing up this story is because we just heard a similar story yesterday where a bolide fell and then some family claimed they saw aliens in the backyard. Does history repeat itself, or do fake stories get rehashed again and again for publicity? You decide. We laid down the facts, and they look like gobbledygook. And that's a boon to knowledge. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. I hope you got something out of the video. All the facts were presented, and they look, well, pretty shaky. Especially because yesterday, the same story came out after a bolide fell, and then aliens were in someone's backyard. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Become a Patreon. Support the work we do. We love you. Be safe. We believe.